Hey everyone, so this is my favorite video to film of the year. We're going to talk about the books that I really hated this year. Okay, I joke. These aren't necessarily books that I absolutely hated, although some of them are. These are books that just really disappointed me. So these are the books that I was excited about, that I thought I would love, and that were therefore some of the most disappointing books because they were terrible. And I hated them. I mean, I know I said I didn't hate all of them, but there may be one or two on here that I didn't actively hate, but most of these books I hated. So if you don't want to hear me rant about books that you love, if you don't love a rant video, then check on out of here. This isn't the video for you because I could be talking about some of your favorites. So, all right, these are in no particular order. I have my list here. Let's get into it. So the first book I want to talk about that was honestly probably one of two of my most disappointing reads of the year, and it's not even a romance, so we're going to talk about it first, and it is Daisy Darker. So I picked this book up, and I was extremely excited about it because this is a mystery thriller, and I had never read from this author before. I had heard really good things about her, and the premise of this is that it's sort of like a retelling of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is one of my favorite books. I just read that earlier this year. I thought it was fantastic. It was a master class in pacing a mystery and thriller. Like, that book is phenomenal if you want to read a mystery or thriller. Like, I was on the edge of my seat, couldn't figure out. It was fantastic. I loved it so freaking much. So, needless to say, because I loved that book so much, I came into Daisy Darker with high expectations because, truthfully, if you have decided to do a sort of spin or retelling on one of the most famous mystery and thrillers of all time by one of the most beloved mystery authors of all time, Agatha Christie, like, you better be up to the task, okay? And this book just utterly disappointed me on pretty much every level. I didn't feel like there was anything thrilling about this. I felt like the mystery was set up in a way to deliberately not have you able to figure out who was perpetrating all the crimes. You know, if you didn't know, And Then There Were None, the basic premise of that is it's like an island. These people are sort of tricked into going there, and one by one they all die until there's only one person left, and you're not supposed to, but, you know, you're trying to decide who's doing all of these murders. And, you know, with so many murders happening and so much mysteriousness happening, I thought this book would be a lot more fast-paced than it was. The pacing in this book, honestly, was probably one of my biggest pet peeves about it because, like I said, And Then There Were None I literally feel like that book is a masterclass in how to pace a novel. It is just fantastically well done as far as pacing, keeping you wanting to read and trying to figure out what's going to happen next. Little tiny bits of the mystery revealed, but never too much. It's so freaking good. And so the pacing in this was absolutely terrible. There was never any element of this book where I felt like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Who's there? Who's going to hurt these characters? Like, somebody, who is it? Like, never. I was just so completely bored by this book. The pacing was terrible. The characters were absolutely despicable. Like, none of them were likable or even, like, redeeming in any type of a way. And also, they were also very flat characters. So, very little dimension, very little development. They were just like, meh, I don't care about you. I don't care that you're dying. I don't care about the murders. I don't care about anything. And then when the mystery is revealed, okay, it does one of my least favorite mystery thriller reveals of all time. I absolutely despise when this is included because it feels like such a cheap trick. It's such lazy writing. It's such poor use of craft, of your writing tools, of your writing toolbox. You just throw this ending in there and you're expecting me to be thrilled and mystified and bamboozled. And truthfully, I was none of those things. And it just made me so mad. I can't even tell you how mad this ending made me. So I'm going to spoil it. Spoiler tag, if you don't want to know. The ending is, oh, she was a ghost and she was killing everybody. Like, could you hear my eyes rolling? Because literally, I could not even handle it. I hated this book. 1 star. Okay, moving on. The rest of these are romances. So the next book is The Do-Over by T.L. Swan. Now listen. I love The Takeover by T.L. Swan with my entire heart and soul, with my whole chest. I love that book. I think it is fantastic. It is so fun. It is so romantic and endearing, and I just love the concept of this woman, this widow with her kids and this beautiful man coming in and just like being everything to them. I just like love it so freaking much. And I did actually like the book that comes after The Takeover, which, what is it? The Casanova, I liked that book. Okay, I know a lot of people didn't. I liked it. I was charmed by it. I liked the romance. So I approached The Do-Over with a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of like, it's probably not gonna be as good as The Takeover for me, but it'll probably be as good as The Casanova for me. This book was so terrible, I gave it 2 stars, honestly. Like, this, you know, the thing about Teal Swan, I feel like, is her writing is very readable. She has this really great way of engaging you in her stories and keeping you going. But the thing that this book very specifically lacked for me was realistic characters. Any type of character development on the part of the hero. This hero is a spoiled brat from beginning to, like, end, basically, until, like, 2 pages before the end, when he finally has this revelation and this redemption arc. But, like, 2 pages before the end, and literally he has 0 growth the entire way through. And the amount of, like, crude body humor in this was just, like, appalling. And I don't understand why romance authors put that in their books. Anyways, I'm just always sort of put off by it, and I'm like, was this really necessary? Is this supposed to make any grown woman laugh or chuckle? Like, who are you writing this for? Are you writing this for teenage boys? My teenage boys don't even laugh at stuff like that, okay? At least not in front of their mother. Anyway, I didn't really believe their romance. I felt like the heroine was way too good for him, and I just, overall, okay, so, like, a lot of my issues with these books, obviously they're going to be personal, but I really try when I have this much dislike for a book to break it down on a craft level and see what exactly was it about this book that didn't work for me. And this one is very much encapsulated in the hero's character. Literally, nothing about this man felt redeemable at all. He was just the epitome of a rich, spoiled kid, and I just despised him. I despised how he treated women. I despised how he treated the heroine. I just don't understand what could have been redeeming about him in any way, because I didn't see it. I didn't see it. He was a jerk. I mean, he was a jerk. I've read worse jerks, but he was childish and just sexist and just terrible, and anyway, moving on. Didn't like that one. Okay, this next book was disappointing because I had high expectations for this one because I'd heard a lot of great buzz about it, and the cover was beautiful, and it sounded so, like, whimsical and fun, and it was, I was hoping it was going to be, like, a new take on a historical romance, and it was the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. Okay, so I can't remember if I gave this book 2 or 3 stars. And this is one of those books that I actually did not hate, but I was still so disappointed, and it completely missed the mark for me, and I didn't enjoy pretty much any of it, except for the opening. The opening scene with the heroine and the hero when they meet, he's a little bit of like a pirate. He comes in there, I don't even remember why, but I don't even remember how they ended up meeting. That's how little I remember about this book. This was so forgettable. But they end up meeting, and he's like a pirate, and she's like she's the heroine, and there's some like magical aspect to her. And he's like sent there, I think he's sent there to do her harm in some way. Anyway, they had this really good first meeting, and I was like getting like Captain Hook vibes from, what's that show with the TV Captain Hook? The fairy tale one. He looks like this. Anyway, I was getting those vibes, and I was like here for it because I love a good fairy tale type of retelling, and I love a Captain Hook type of character. But this book was just like, it was so like zany in the worst possible way, where like the things that happened to the characters just seemed like a little bit like screwball-y and zany, and I don't know how else to describe it other than like over the top, but not like over dramatic like you get in some dark romance or some indie romance, but like over the top as in just like quirky, zany, out there. And just like it just had me like rolling my eyes so much. Like I just did not like this writing style. It was not for me at all in any way. But also there were flying houses in here, and I don't know why. I never really understood why that's like their pirate ships. I don't know. This book seemed like it would be good. It seemed like it would be charming, but the writing style was literally one of the worst I've ever read, with her constant zany quips just all the time. And then like this nonsensical plot that I don't understand. I don't know. That one, no, was very disappointing, and I'm sad because I really wanted to like that. Okay, so this book, I actually have 2, and truthfully, I could put 3 books up from this author on here. And it pains me, because I also had her on my favorite new to me authors for this year. But probably the one that is the most disappointing to me is The Devil Gets His Due. This is Elizabeth O'Rourke's newest book. I talked about this in a recent vlog. This book was so completely disappointing. However, I will say that I also found The Devil You Know extremely disappointing. This book read like it was written for TikTok fans with the extreme amount of spice and nothing else. And also Drowning Aaron. This book was probably much the least offensive of the three, but also disappointing. And yeah, so I've read 5 books by this author. 3 of them, the last 3 I've read have been so disappointing. The first 2 were really good, the first 2 books in the Devil series. But this book, I don't know, like, okay, so when The Devil You Know also came out this year. I read that and it felt so distinctly different from the other 2 in the series that I was like, maybe this was just like a miss for this author, because it truly felt very surface level, very shallow, very smut driven, and nothing else. And I think the thing that I like about Elizabeth O'Rourke, the 2 books I'd read by her, is how emotionally and complex they were, how emotionally driven and complex they were. And The Devil You Know was not that at all. There was no depth here whatsoever. It was just 100% felt like a cash grab for spicy readers. So The Devil Gets His Due, I was hoping would return to the previous format in the first 2 books. And while it wasn't as like spicy TikTok driven, it was still not good. There was none of the character development that were in the first 2 books in the series. There was none of the chemistry in the romance. There was none of the romantic development. There was literally very little about this book that I found to be compelling in the first 2. It honestly felt almost like it was written by a different author. That's how disappointing it was. Again, one of my big pet peeves is lack of character development, lack of relationship development. I cannot abide a book with characters that are flat, that are stereotyped, that have no arc or no motivation really. And that's what was happening here. I mean, if you give me hero, redemption, or heroine even in the last 2 pages, that's a failure for me. I want to see the journey of them getting there. I don't want it to just like turn the page and be like, and then he changed. Get out of here. No. I was so disappointed by this book. Alright, this is the big one. This is the big one. This is my most hated book I have read this year. And is it for personal reasons? Partly. Yeah, definitely partly. I am being a little bit petty about this book for sure, but let me tell you why, okay? So this book is The Confidence of Wildflowers. Now, I picked this book right when it was released. I had heard from ARC readers that it was fantastic, that it was emotional, that it was romantic, and I was like, ding, 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 sign me up. That's everything that I want. Also, the cover is beautiful, and I find that so sad because the book inside is awful. This remains the vlog where I talked about this book, one of my most watched videos of all time. So I went into this book and I read the trigger warning in the front, which says trigger warning for death. And I'm like, okay. So spoilers for this book, by the way. So I proceed to read the book, and pretty soon, right off the bat, I think it's her mother, dies from cancer. And I was like, oh, okay, trigger warning achieved, death, right? That's literally the trigger warning at the time was death. Which is a trigger warning, you know, she checked that box, she did that. But I proceeded to read the book, and I definitely struggled with the maturity level of the heroine. She was in a relationship with an older man. She was like babysitting his kid or whatever. And she was also in a relationship with another guy who was very young, but she just read extremely immature to me. Immature in a way that made it unbelievable to me that an older man would find her attractive. And if he did find this young woman attractive, like, yick, you know? Like, if her maturity level is down here, and my guy's is up here, he's got a kid, so he's got to be, and he's like that's a little gross. I don't like that. I don't like that imbalance of maturity levels. It has to read like this is actually a grown woman, even if she's 21 or 19 or whatever. I don't even remember how old she was. So that was off-putting to me, and that right there made it so I wasn't fully invested in the romance, because I was like, this is giving me the ick. This is giving me weird vibes. I don't love this. I don't love the maturity disparity there. So then, here we have the big spoiler, okay? So, we come to the end. And of course there needs to be something that drives our couple apart, because this is a duet, right? And this author did something that I consider to be a cardinal sin in fiction. I don't care if it's romance. I don't care what genre you are writing. If you choose to kill a character, a main character that we have read about, you better be doing that for a dang good reason, and not just to break your couple apart, to move. It cannot exist for plot reasons. If you're going to kill a character off, it needs to emotionally hit that reader more than just shock value, more than just the shock of it, more than just what it is going to mean to the romance, because that feels very cheap. That feels extremely, extremely low effort, because obviously you're going to get an emotional reaction. And especially if the character you decide to kill off is the kid. That's right, the hero's kid. The kid this heroine has been babysitting, has developed a relationship with. So I want to be clear. I don't have a problem with character death. Some of my favorite books, not romances, but books, have painful character death. I love Game of Thrones, okay? Like, I love Crooked Kingdom, okay? One of my favorite books. Major loss in that book. I don't mind if a character dies, but I want that death to mean something to the reader and not just be a plot device with all the subtlety of a 50-pound hammer to the face. Okay? So, that made me so angry. That made me so angry that I gave this book a 1 star. But I want to also be clear, it is not 1 star entirely because of that plot twist decision that the author put in there. Although I stand by my response that anytime you're going to forcefully, emotionally manipulate your reader's feelings in that way, that is not demonstrative of any type of writing skill at all. This is a last-ditch effort to get some emotion out of your readers, and that offends me, because readers are smarter than that. Show us how you're going to develop pain. Don't just throw in some cheap trick like that. Alright, moving on. So, this next book, I don't have an awful lot to say about this, but I was still super disappointed that this was actually the first book I read this year, and it was Misconduct by Penelope Douglas. Now listen, I have found very few Penelope Douglas books to like. I know I am in the minority. Everybody loves Penelope Douglas. However, the only book I've ever loved is Birthday Girl. And when I read Birthday Girl and loved it, everyone was like, you know, you should read Misconduct because that's similar. So I picked it up, and I did go in there with expectations for similar vibes to Birthday Girl. I found none of those in there. This, to me, was very much heat-driven and heat-driven only, taboo-driven and taboo-driven only, and I just don't care about that. That's not enough to get me to care about a book. I find that to be boring. I don't think it's dangerous or cool or gripping. I feel that it is, again, relying on those overpowering tropes that are, of course, going to manipulate you emotionally, but there's no subtlety, there's no development, there's nothing there other than, and she's the teacher, and his son is the kid in her class, and it was disappointing because the development and the beauty of the relationship in Birthday Girl was so great. And even though it did have like that taboo nature of it, it was handled so well, and that was lacking in Misconduct. It was 0 out of 10 on those points for me. Again, these are all my opinions, so you're getting them full force, unedited. Okay, now this book. This book is not a terrible book. I gave this book 3 stars. It's called The Undertaking of Hart and Mercy, and I actually haven't even talked about this book on my channel because I read this in the summer. I got an arc of it, I read it, and for some reason I didn't do a monthly wrap-up, so I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But I heard about this book on TikTok, and somebody was really raving about how beautifully it was written, how emotionally it was, how they cried at the end, and I was just like, I love it! I want it! And so I requested the arc, and I got it, and they were right. It is beautifully written. This prose in here is beautiful. There were some sentences in here that were strung together so perfectly that I was just like, I loved it. I loved it. And I also felt like the world in this was very unique. This is a fantasy romance, but it's in like an alternate reality where there are like zombie type creatures, but there are also just like other creatures. Like there's a talking bunny that looks like a person. And it was giving very strong, like, Ghibli movie vibes in that way. Like, things that just felt nonsensical, but beautiful and whimsical, that were just sort of, like, appeared, and you were just like, oh, okay, you know? So I didn't hate that. I actually found that quite charming and unique, because I hadn't really read anything like that that was working for me, you know? So my complaints with this is the world was a little difficult to understand. There wasn't really a lot of explanation, or it wasn't really shown to you through the characters a ton. I would have liked that to be developed more. But that's not really my complaint. My complaint is mostly with, like, the romance in here, because it's about our heroine who is an undertaker in this world. So because there are zombies, like, a lot of people, zombie type things, a lot of people are dying and they don't know what to do with the bodies. And so undertaking is like a big business. And the hero is actually a man who brings the bodies to the undertaker. And I just felt like this whole concept just intrigued me so much, because I was like, this could really play really beautifully with themes of life and death and finding love and romance amid this, you know, dark world. Like, I love that concept so much. And it just, I don't know, like, the hero and heroine, like, they were like enemies, but I didn't really understand why. And it just felt, again, like their romance didn't feel realistic. And that seems weird to say because of the setting, but in any book, fantasy or whatever, the romance needs to feel realistic, and it didn't really feel like it was organically developed. I didn't really buy how they went from enemies, and then they were, like, writing to one another, but they didn't know they were writing to each other, and he found out before she did, and he fell in love with her that way, and then all of a sudden, like, they were being physically intimate, and I was just sort of like, I feel like we missed some steps in here. I don't really know how we got from there to here, and I didn't see it. So I gave this book 3 stars, and I do feel like a part of that is generous, because this book also had pacing issues, like bad, like big time pacing issues, where it was a lot of focus on the words and the beautiful words and the language and the setting, and not really progressing the story forward in that way. But the romance just, I don't understand it. And it makes me so sad. Like, this, of all the books on here, this one specifically probably hurts the most disappointment-wise, because I was so excited for it. I thought, this sounds so unique and weird, and I'm here for it, and I want my heart to be broken, and I want to feel the pain of these two, and I didn't feel a thing for them. And I'm sad. And I wanted this to be good. I wanted it to be good so bad. And it wasn't. Okay, now, the next one. The last one. Oh, I know a lot of you are going to hate me about this, but I have to say it. The last one is Annie's Song. We read this for the Rake Appreciation Society early on this year, and this is a historical romance. It's with our heroine who she's actually deaf, but everyone around her believes her to be, like, with the mentality of a child, and so they treat her in that way. She ends up being assaulted brutally in the beginning, and the brother of the man who assaulted her decides to marry her to make things right, and it's their romance. I'm really distilling it down. And I had heard nothing but good things about this, great things about this, in fact. And I really, really struggled with this one. I gave it 2 stars. Okay. I'm gonna try and keep this short. My biggest problem with this book is the way that Annie was portrayed to be mentally childlike while having the physical body of a woman, and the way that the hero constantly lusted after her and desired her because of her womanly body, while still believing that she had the mind of a child. And I just, honestly, that was like, that's it. I cannot get on board with this romance. That just was so gross to me. I just could not deal with it at all. And I just, I'm sorry, like I've talked about that earlier. I age gaps when the woman specifically is either with the maturity level or believed to have the maturity level or the mentality of a child and the body of a woman, I hate that so much. I just, like, I don't want to read romances at all involving that sort of glorify that we know happens in real life, where men do, not all men, but, you know, like, some men, gross, pervy men, like, they like young, like, no, absolutely not, immediately no. I just could not reconcile that. And the breaking point truly was that Annie, because she was deaf and she had such a limited understanding of the world because no one could communicate with her, she is pregnant and she believes she's going to lay an egg. And I'm just sort of like, I couldn't, no, 2 stars. Very disappointed. Okay, I am so sorry this video took way longer than I thought. That was going to be a short video, but clearly when I rant, I talk a lot. So, yeah, hope you're still my friends. And remember, these are just my opinions, and I am just one random person on the internet talking about books. This isn't my job. I just do this for fun. So thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.